There's something nobody tells you about being the responsible one in a family. It doesn't come with a thank you. It comes with a longer list of names to pay for every month. My name is Lily. I'm 29 years old, and for the past 6 years, I was the invisible foundation holding my family's house of cards together. Not metaphorically. Literally. I paid the mortgage on the house I didn't live in. I paid the car insurance on the car I didn't drive. I paid the credit card bills for the vacations I wasn't invited on. I did all of it quietly, dutifully, hoping that one day someone would look at me, really look at me and say, "Lily, we see what you've been doing. Thank you." That day never came. What came instead was a text from my mother at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. 7 words that changed everything. "You need to apologize to your brother or else." Or else. Like I was a child being sent to my room. Like 6 years of my salary bleeding into their accounts meant nothing the moment I said something they didn't like. I stared at those words for a long time, sitting alone in my apartment in Chicago, listening to the rain hit the window. Then I put my phone down, opened my laptop, and booked a one-way flight to Reykjavik, Iceland. And then I started canceling every single automatic payment I had ever set up for them. But let me take you back to where it all started, because you need to understand what kind of family I came from before you can understand what I did and why I have absolutely no regrets. I grew up in a suburb of Cincinnati, the middle child between my older brother Marcus and my younger sister Dana. My father worked in sales. My mother stayed home. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either until my father lost his job when I was 16, and everything shifted. My mother picked up part-time work at a salon, and my father took odd jobs that never seemed to last longer than a few months. By the time I graduated high school, the financial pressure in our house was something you could physically feel, like humidity before a storm. I worked through college. Scholarships, part-time jobs, one summer where I waitressed double shifts 6 days a week just to pay for my books. I graduated with a degree in accounting and landed a position at a mid-size financial consulting firm in Chicago. The salary wasn't extravagant, but it was more money than anyone in my family had ever seen me earn, and that was when the requests started. The first one felt reasonable. My mother called me 3 months into my new job to tell me that the property taxes on the house were due, and they were short by $800. I sent it without blinking. Of course I did. I was grateful to finally be in a position to help. Then it was the electric bill. Then it was my father's truck payment, because he'd missed 2 months and they were going to repossess it. Then Marcus, my older brother, who had never held a full-time job for more than 8 months, at a stretch needed help with his rent because his roommate had left, and he just needed a bridge until he figured things out. That bridge lasted 4 years. I kept a running total in a notebook I hid in my desk drawer. Not because I planned to ever use it, but because writing the numbers down was the only way I could process how much of myself I was giving away. By the time I was 27, the number in that notebook had crossed $40,000. $40,000. I could have put a down payment on a condo. I could have fully funded my retirement account for 5 years. I could have taken the sabbatical I had been dreaming about since my second year at work. Instead, I had been quietly, invisibly bankrolling a family that barely acknowledged me at Christmas. And Marcus was the one they were always proud of. Marcus was figuring things out. Marcus was creative. Marcus had so much potential. When he announced, 2 months ago, that he was getting married to his girlfriend of 8 months and expected a big family celebration, my mother immediately started talking about what the family would contribute to the wedding. I sat there at the dinner table, nodding, calculating in my head how much of that family contribution was going to come from my bank account. The incident that ignited everything happened at Marcus's engagement party. His fiancée's family had money. Real money. And there was an undercurrent of comparison all evening that made me uncomfortable. At one point, Marcus was holding court with his future in-laws, talking about his entrepreneurial ventures and his plans for the future with the confidence of someone who had never had to worry about where next month's rent was coming from. Because he hadn't. I had been his safety net for years. I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't make a scene. I simply said, to the small group of people standing near me, that Marcus had always had a talent for finding solutions to his financial problems. My tone was light. It was even meant to be a compliment, in a sideways kind of way. But Marcus heard it from across the room, and the look on his face told me he understood exactly what I meant. He didn't say anything that night. He waited until I was in the car with my mother driving me back to the train station, and then he called her. I could hear his voice through the phone, low and tight with anger. She hung up and turned to me and said, "You embarrassed him in front of her family. You need to apologize." I told her I had nothing to apologize for. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, my mother had called me 4 times. My father had sent me 2 texts that read more like formal notices than anything a parent would write. And Marcus himself had not contacted me once not to address what I'd said, not to ask for my side, not to extend any kind of conversation. Just silence from him, and pressure from everyone else. Until that Tuesday night text. "You need to apologize to your brother or else." Or else what, exactly? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I knew what it meant. It meant I would be unwelcome at the wedding. It meant I would be painted as the difficult one, the jealous one, the sister who couldn't be happy for her brother. It meant that the story of this family would be rewritten, as it always was, to center everyone except me. I sat with the phone in my hand for 20 minutes, and then something shifted inside me. Something quiet and permanent, like a door closing softly at the end of a long hallway. I put the phone on the kitchen counter. I opened my laptop. I booked a flight to Reykjavik, leaving Thursday morning, 4 days away. I reserved a small rental cottage on the edge of the city, the kind with a private hot tub and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking black volcanic rock and the gray Atlantic. And then I started working. I opened my banking app first. My parents had a joint checking account that I had set up automatic transfers to every month $600, regular as rent, which they used for utilities and incidentals. I went in and scheduled the transfers to stop. The last one had already gone through 2 weeks ago. There would not be another. My brother had a credit card that he had, years ago, added me to as a joint account holder for emergencies. The emergencies had been frequent and creative. I removed myself from the account. It took 11 minutes on hold with the card company and a single authorization form submitted electronically. 11 minutes to undo 4 years of exposure. My parents were on my family cell phone plan. I had added them 3 years ago because it saved them money. I called the carrier, gave them my account PIN, and asked to have both lines separated from my plan. The representative was professional and efficient. She told me they would receive a notification and would need to set up their own accounts within 30 days if they wanted to keep their numbers. I thanked her and hung up. The mortgage was the one thing I couldn't stop automatically. It was in my parents' names, and my contributions had always been informal transfers to their account. But those transfers were the ones I had just ended. They had been making the minimum payment on their own before I started helping, which meant they could do it again. It would be tight. It would be uncomfortable. But it was their mortgage, their house, their responsibility. It took me 2 hours to unwind 6 years of financial entanglement. 2 hours to dismantle something I had spent years quietly building, one payment at a time. When I was done, I closed the laptop and sat in the dark of my apartment for a while. I wasn't crying. I noticed that with some surprise. I had expected to feel sad, or guilty, or both. Instead, I felt something cleaner than either of those things. I felt the specific relief of a person who has finally put down something very heavy that they had been carrying alone for a very long time. I texted my mother back. "I have nothing to apologize for. I hope the wedding is beautiful." Then I put my phone on silent and went to bed. I told my manager at work that I was taking a week of personal time. He asked if everything was okay. I told him I just needed some space to think, which was true. He was understanding. I had never taken an unplanned week off in 3 years, and I think that fact alone told him everything he needed to know about how serious I was. The flight to Reykjavik was 6 hours. I spent most of it with noise-canceling headphones on, not watching anything, just sitting with the white noise and the darkness behind my closed eyes, trying to get used to the new quiet inside me. When we landed, and I stepped off the plane into the sharp, clean cold of an Icelandic morning, something in my chest expanded. I hadn't realized how constricted I had been feeling until I stepped somewhere no one could reach me, and breathed air that had nothing to do with any of them. The cottage was small and perfect. Stone walls, a wood stove, windows that framed the landscape like paintings. I dropped my bag, made coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. I had not come to Iceland to vacation. I had come to work the kind of work that had nothing to do with my job and everything to do with the truth. I opened a spreadsheet. I had always been good with numbers. It was why I went into accounting, why I was good at my job, and it was, I now realized, the exact skill that had made me so useful to my family and so blind to how they were using me. I could spot a discrepancy in a corporate balance sheet from across a conference table. I had never once turned that same precision onto my own finances. I started from the beginning. The first transfer I had ever sent my parents $800 for property taxes 6 years ago. I found it in my old bank statements, a file I kept archived in the cloud. I entered the date and the amount. Then I moved to the next one. It took me 3 hours to build the full picture. I worked methodically, chronologically, pulling statements and entering figures. The mortgage contribution, the truck payment, the electric bills. My brother's rent, stretching across 4 years in amounts that ranged from $300 to $1,200, depending on the month and whatever story he had that month. His car registration, the time he needed money to pay a security deposit on an apartment, and promised he'd pay me back within 60 days. That was 2 years ago. When I was finished, I sat back and looked at the total. $43,280. I had been carrying $43,000 of someone else's life on my back, and the last thing they had asked of me was an apology. I printed the spreadsheet at the cottage's small printer I had thought to bring my portable one just in case, and organized it into a folder. I labeled it cleanly, professionally, every transaction dated, every amount verified against a bank record. It was not a weapon yet. It was just the truth, organized with the care I gave to every client file at work. But I knew what I was going to do with it, and the knowledge of that sat in my chest like a lit match. My phone had been on silent since Tuesday night. On Friday afternoon, my second day in Iceland, I finally looked at it. 41 missed calls. 67 text messages. I scrolled through them without opening most of them. My mother's name appeared more than anyone else's. A few from my aunt on my father's side. 2 from a number I didn't recognize. And not a single one from Marcus. My mother's messages moved through stages I recognized from years of watching her operate. First there was confusion. "Lily, what is happening with the phone bill? Is everything okay?" Then there was alarm. "The automatic payment didn't come through. What is going on?" Then there was anger. "You are acting like a child. Your brother has done nothing wrong. Call me right now." Then, by the third day, something that looked almost like panic. "Lily, please. We need to talk. Just call me." I put the phone back down and went and sat in the hot tub outside with a glass of wine, watching the clouds move fast across a gray-white sky. Somewhere below the horizon, the sun was doing something complicated. I could see the light shifting, amber and pale, in a way that felt dramatic even by the standards of a sky that had clearly never been asked to be subtle. I thought about what my mother's voice would sound like if I called her. The particular way she adjusted her tone depending on what she needed: soft when she was asking for something, tight and clipped when she was telling me I had failed at something. I had spent 29 years calibrating myself to those vocal shifts, adjusting my behavior in response to them like a satellite correcting its orbit. I was done correcting. The call I had been waiting for came on Saturday evening. It wasn't from my mother or my father. It was from the unknown number I had noticed earlier. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. It was my brother's fiancée's older sister. Her name was Patricia. She told me, a little awkwardly, but with what I could tell was genuine intention, that she had been at the engagement party and had been hearing things from my family over the past week that didn't sit right with her. She told me my mother had been telling people that I had suffered some kind of breakdown, that I was jealous of Marcus. That the financial situation, she used that word carefully, was something I had made up to make my brother look bad, and that I had always been the problem in the family. I thanked Patricia for calling. I asked her if she could tell me when and where the wedding rehearsal dinner was happening. She told me it was the following Friday at my parents' house in Cincinnati. I thanked her again and told her I would be in touch. I spent Sunday making arrangements. I booked a flight home that left Monday morning. I spent Sunday evening at the kitchen table in the cottage, going over the spreadsheet one more time, making sure every number was right, every source documented. Then I drafted a short cover letter, professional, clear, no emotional language, that summarized the contents of the folder and its purpose. I printed that too. I paper-clipped everything together with a small binder clip, the way I would organize any client deliverable. I closed the laptop and looked out at the dark water. I had come to Iceland to get clear, and I was clear. The flight home felt nothing like the flight out. On the way to Iceland, I had been escaping something. On the way back, I was moving toward something. There's a specific kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're going to do, and why not the loud, performative confidence of someone who needs to convince themselves, but the quiet kind that sits in your shoulders and keeps them level. I had that on the plane home. I ate my whole meal. I slept for 2 hours. I landed in Chicago at noon on Monday and went straight to my apartment. I took a shower. I unpacked. I went back to work Tuesday, and nobody needed to know what was about to happen except me. I drove to Cincinnati on Friday afternoon. I had told no one I was coming. My parents' house was a tan colonial in a neighborhood that had seen better days. There were cars I didn't recognize lining both sides of the street, the fiancé's family, I assumed, already there for the rehearsal dinner. Through the living room window, I could see lights and movement, the warm blur of people gathered together. I sat in my rental car for about 5 minutes. I was not nervous exactly. I was feeling something more like the still, focused state I got into right before a difficult client meeting present. Calm, ready. I walked to the front door and knocked. My father answered. The blood left his face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. "Lily," he said. "Hi, Dad," I said. "I'd like to come in." He stepped back. I walked in. The living room was full. Marcus and his fiancée were standing together near the fireplace, surrounded by her parents and 2 of her siblings. My mother was at the back of the room near the kitchen doorway, holding a dish towel. She saw me and went absolutely rigid. Marcus saw me half a second after she did. The expression on his face did something complicated. Started as surprise, moved through something I might have called guilt if I didn't know him better, and settled into a careful blankness. His fiancé's father, a man named Robert, who I had met exactly once, briefly, at the engagement party, was the one who broke the silence. "Oh, I didn't know we were expecting another guest," he said pleasantly. "You weren't," I said. I kept my voice easy and even. "I'm Lily, Marcus's sister. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have something I wanted to share before the wedding, and I thought it was better to do it in person." I held out the folder to Robert. He took it, a little uncertainly. His wife leaned in. Marcus started moving toward me, and my mother said, "Lily, don't you dare." But by then Robert had opened the folder and was looking at the first page. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a 6-year accounting," I said. "Of the money I've given to this family, the total is $43,280. It's all documented dates, amounts, the accounts they went into. I kept records." The room was quiet in a way that felt dense, pressurized. Marcus said, "You have no right to." "I have every right," I said quietly. "You've been telling people I invented a financial situation to make you look bad." "I didn't invent anything. I documented it. There's a difference." Robert was still looking at the pages. His wife had her hand over her mouth. My mother had crossed the room and was standing between Marcus and me, her face a color I didn't have a name for. "This has nothing to do with them," my mother said, and her voice had lost its shape. "This is a family matter, Lily. This is private." "It stopped being private," I said, "when you told people I had a breakdown, when you told people I was lying, when you decided the version of this story where I was the problem was more useful to you than the truth." Marcus's fiancée, her name was Brianna, and I want to be clear that she had been nothing but kind to me in every interaction we'd had, was looking at Marcus with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of someone doing rapid, uncomfortable recalculation. reorganizing what they thought they knew into a shape that fit the new information. "Marcus," she said very quietly. He didn't answer her. He was looking at me. I had thought I might feel something in this moment: triumph, or grief, or anger, or some specific satisfying cocktail of all three. What I actually felt was calm. Not the numb, dissociated calm of someone who has shut themselves down, but the real kind. The kind that comes after you have already done all the feeling you needed to do alone, in the right place, at the right time, and arrived at the other side of it. "I'm not here to ruin anything," I said. "I'm here because I was told I had nothing to stand on. I wanted everyone in this room to know that I do." I looked at my mother. "I'm not apologizing. I never had anything to apologize for." I turned and walked back to the front door. My father, still standing near the entry hall where he had let me in, stepped aside without a word. I walked past him, and out the door and down the front steps to my rental car. I drove to a hotel 7 minutes away, checked in, ordered room service, and sat on the bed watching a show I don't even remember now, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt completely, entirely light. The months that followed were quieter than I expected. My mother called twice, both times in the first week. I let both calls go to voicemail. The messages were long and fractured and full of competing emotions, anger and something that was almost but not quite an acknowledgement of what had happened. I listened to both of them once and then deleted them. Not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. My brother and his fiancée did get married 3 weeks later, in a smaller ceremony than originally planned. I heard about it through my aunt on my father's side, a woman named Diane, who had always been steady and perceptive, and who called me a month after the rehearsal dinner to tell me that she had known for a long time that I was carrying too much, and that she was sorry no one had said so sooner. We talked for almost 2 hours. I cried during exactly one part of that conversation, and it wasn't the part about the money. What happened to me, practically speaking. I put the money I had been sending to my family every month into a high-yield savings account instead. In 8 months, that, combined with what I was already saving, added up to enough for a down payment on a condo in a neighborhood in Chicago that I had always wanted to live in but told myself I couldn't afford. I signed the papers in February. I painted the kitchen a dark, specific green that I had been thinking about for years. I put bookshelves on every wall that could hold them. At work, I had a performance review in November. My manager told me that the clarity and focus I'd brought to my caseload over the past several months had been noticed, and that they were putting me forward for a senior position that had opened up. I accepted. I applied to a certificate program in financial planning that I had bookmarked 3 years ago, and never felt I had the bandwidth to pursue. I started the coursework in January. It fits me in a way that I can't entirely explain, except to say that it feels like using the thing I'm good at for myself, instead of quietly handing it over to people who never asked how much it cost me. My father emailed me in March. It was a short email, plainly written, not the kind of thing my mother would have helped him compose, which told me something. He said he had gone through the folder I had left at the house. He said he had never fully understood the scope of what I had been doing, and that he should have been paying closer attention. He said he was sorry. He didn't ask for anything. I read it twice. Then I wrote back. I told him I appreciated him saying so. I told him I wasn't ready for phone calls yet, but that I was open to email. He wrote back the next day, and we have been doing that slowly, carefully, with the particular caution of 2 people trying to find out if there is something worth preserving ever since. I don't know what we will become. I am holding that question loosely, without forcing it toward any particular answer. Here is what I know. I spent 6 years believing that the cost of being loved was staying useful. I spent 6 years making myself smaller and more manageable so that I could remain necessary, because necessary felt close enough to valued that I stopped noticing the difference. I was wrong about that. The difference is enormous. It is the difference between being seen and being used, and I spent a long time confusing the two. If you have felt that weight, if you have been the one quietly paying, quietly absorbing, quietly holding something together that no one else seemed to notice was held, I want to say this clearly. The accounting you have been keeping in your head is real. The cost is real. and you are allowed to put it down. You are allowed to stop. I am Lily. I am 29 years old. I paid for 6 years of a family that treated me like infrastructure, and then I stopped and flew somewhere cold and clear and looked at the numbers with my own eyes and came home and told the truth in a room full of people. And I am doing just fine. If this story reached something in you, please leave a comment below. I read everyone. If you know someone who has been carrying more than their share this with them. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe to Revenge by Facts. We'll be right here.